am incredibly excited to once again be holding Yu-Gi-Oh cards. It's been, God, I don't know, 10 years maybe since I last held an actual package of Yu-Gi-Oh cards in my hand. So if the thumbnail didn't give it away already, I made a choice as to where to start this structured deck journey, so to speak, and unshockingly, we have chosen to go with Shaddoll Showdown. I am a veteran Magic the Gathering player, and my favorite color to play there is blue and black. So I am that one asshole that is just constantly saying, hey, you want to play a card game? Not when I'm here. I play the card games. Shaddoll seemed to be the only real deck in the current game, I would say, that still produces this sort of control feeling that not only are you putting negates on the board, but you are actively preventing your opponent from playing the game. So, Shaddoll seemed like a good enough place to start, especially considering the fact that this is one of the few decks that still play like the game used to back when I played. Like, in this deck, it is reliable that you just set 3 and pass, which back in the day when I played was quite common. Nowadays, if you don't have 16 creatures on the board by your first turn, you have essentially lost. Shaddoll say no to this, and they simply go, hey, it doesn't matter because we keep coming back. But before we get to anything else, I of course have this one here. 2 extra ones over here that I'll open by myself later. But let's go through what the Shaddoll Showdown structure deck actually has to give us. Let's see if the packaging is as goddamn sturdy as it usually is. Turns out it is. We are going to Hello? Can you, come here? I don't want to break the boxes, but I guess I have to. Oh my god, they are stuck in there tight. Come here. I'm gonna knock over the camera. There we go. I just took 50 years off my life, didn't I? We are going to open up the actual structure deck with my cat looking very, very interested in the prowling plastic. Give me 5 seconds and you'll have her up. Who would have thunk? You are not getting cat paws. Mascot of the channel already, I see ya. Also, apologizing for the audio. It is in the middle of the day currently. You'll hear dogs outside, you'll hear me talking, but such is the way of life for myself. Now, my camera actually focusing correctly. Let's go through what the structure deck actually includes, because it is a really, really good starting point. First of all, an El Shaddoll Grista must first be fusion summoned. When your opponent would special summon a monster while you have a Shaddoll card in your hand, you can, as a quick effect, negate the summon entirely, destroy the monster, and then send 1 Shaddoll card from your hand to the graveyard. The special thing about this is the fact that all of the Shaddoll cards generally have an effect when being discarded by a card effect. So having to discard a Shaddoll is actually a good thing. Grista is very interesting. We'll put you down here. One of the key cards to the deck, arguably, El Shaddoll Apkalone. 2 Shaddoll monsters with different attributes. It must first be fusion summoned, as you'll see with most of the Shaddoll cards. It cannot be destroyed by battle, and you can only use one of the following effects each turn. If it is special summoned, you can target one phase of monster on the field and negate its effects. Meaning if we need to beat through something that we can't normally beat through, marvelous. If it's sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 Shaddoll card from your deck to your hand and then discard a card. Again, same deal. Shaddoll cards want to be discarded. It's kind of what they do. Then, our actual big, almost breaking card, El Shaddoll Construct. Similarly, a Shaddoll monster and a light monster, it must first be fusion summoned, and when it is special summoned, you can send 1 Shaddoll card from the deck to the graveyard, activating whatever effect you want essentially from the deck. And at the start of the damage step, if this card battles a special summon monster, it is immediately destroyed. Meaning we can run this into really heavy beaters and still have a way to beat through their gates. 3 of our definite kings and queens, supposedly, of the deck so far. We then have Quad Shaddoll Chaos, which you'll come to see with all the Shaddoll cards that they have an effect from being face down and flipped up, as well as one being discarded to the graveyard. So, Chaos. If this card is flipped face up, you can special summon 1 Shaddoll monster from your hand and face up or face down defense position, as you wish yourself. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can add 1 from the hand to the graveyard, and if you do, your monsters gain attack and defense equal to the level of the monster that you sent. Not particularly super useful in the deck. I mean, being able to flip it open to special summon another dude is okay, but there are so many other cards that do this that we'll have more use for. Specifically speaking, Shaddoll Wendy. When it is flipped, you can special summon one Shaddoll monster from your deck in face up or face down defense position except Wendy. If it's discarded, you can do the same thing, however, only in face down defense. This card is so good in Shaddolls. It is a literal core card, and thank God we're going to get 3 of her. Nail Shaddoll Ariel. You can flip and target one of your banished Shaddoll monsters and special summon it. This will become relevant with a few other cards in the deck. And if it is discarded, you can target 3 cards in any graveyard and banish them. This is also important because we can both banish our own to later on use Ariel to get them back, or banish our opponent's card that we know they're going to interact with. Incredibly random noises outside. Hopefully I cut that out because I'm an idiot if I didn't. Then, of course, our one of few trap cards was with Shaddoll Incarnation. It straight up just special summons the Shaddoll from the graveyard. It is essentially Call of the Haunted, but better. Then, once it's in the graveyard, we can banish a Shaddoll card and this card, and either change one face down defense position monster to face down monster you control to face up, essentially flipping it and activating its effect, or change one face up to face down to reactivate its effect later. Also an incredibly good card, considering the only caveat with this is that it can only special summon Shaddoll monsters. But we don't care. It is so strong. It can bring back a construct. It could bring back I cannot pronounce this correctly. Is it Apkalone, I think? And just immediately act as a negate. It is really, really strong. Marvelous card. And then our control master, El Shaddoll Winda. Literally, when this is summoned, you get to just say fuck you to your opponent. They can only special summon one monster a turn, as well as us, for as long as Winda is on the field. But for us, we don't really need that many monsters on the field to do what we want to do. If we have both Winda and Construct out, we can essentially beat through anything, considering Construct will just bash through whatever they special summoned immediately, and Winda will strike at them, leaving them essentially weak. At least that is the plan. So Winda, great card. Then we have the Shaddoll card included only in this structure deck, as far as I'm aware at least. El Shaddoll Shekinaga. When a special summon monster specifically activates its effect while you have a Shaddoll card in your hand, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy the monster. Then toss another Shaddoll card from your hand to the graveyard. Another strong negate. And this becomes a perfect super poly target, which we will get into soon. Then our bread and butter spell, Shaddoll Fusion. Literally allowing us, of course, to fuse one of our Shaddoll monsters. But more importantly, if our opponent has a monster from the extra deck on the field, we can use cards straight from our deck. Meaning we can simply play this, get any of our big boys by tossing cards from the graveyard. Absolutely marvelous. Then we have a Shaddoll Falco, which is, we're getting into the common cards here, which is, as it should be. Falco is interesting. Once it's flipped up, you can special summon one Shaddoll monster from your graveyard in face down defense position, and if Falco himself is discarded, he special summons himself. Hedgehog lets us add a Shaddoll Spell Trap from our deck to our hand if it's flipped. Squamata flips up and destroys a monster on the field. Next up is Shaddoll Hound, where we can target one Shaddoll card in our graveyard and bounce it back to our hand. Shaddoll Dragon. Again, we can target a card we don't control, but return it to the hand this time, meaning it avoids destruction prevention. Shaddoll Beast. Once it's flipped up, we essentially do a looting by drawing 2 cards and then discarding a card, which again, for Shaddolls, is very good. And if it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, we simply draw 1 card. Few Pendulum monster, which we are most likely not going to use. Shaddoll Sephranaga, which is Shaddoll Zephracor, which we also probably will not play. These 2 cards build into an archetype that is very bad. People say that Pendulum is best deck, and yeah, it can do some amazing things. If you're playing good Pendulum cards, these guys are not. Now for some non-Shaddolls. Hello, Mr. Band, or, well, used to be banned back when I played. Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning. Lava Golem. Sideboarding cards in a structure deck. Dark Armed Dragon. Not sure why this is here. Fairy Tale Sleeper. With a flip effect, you can special summon one monster from your hand. Just any monster. Okay. Trick Clown. Armageddon Knight. When this card is summoned, send one dark monster from your deck to the graveyard. Electromagnetic Turtle. This card I've actually played some of, and it has a very interesting use in the deck by itself. But during your opponent's battle phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard to immediately end the battle phase, but you can only do it once per duel. So essentially, if we're in a position where we know we're going to get wombo comboed, and we need a way out of it, but we need one more turn to do so, we can actually have sent Electromagnetic Turtle to the graveyard in order to banish it to immediately end the battle phase, gain ourselves the next turn that we need, and win from there. Definitely a contender for the deck. Mathematician. When this is normal summoned, you can send one level 4 or lower monster from your deck to the graveyard. And then we have the Shaddoll's field spell, Curse of the Shadow Prison, El Shaddoll Fusion, which is a quick spell. Fusion summon one Shaddoll monster from your extra deck using monster from your hand or field. This card is incredible because we can use it as a battle trap. If something's targeted that we don't want gone, simply flip up El Shaddoll Fusion and make something that is more useful to the board. Absolutely. Next up is Nef Shaddoll Fusion, which is an equip spell. Activate this card by declaring one attribute, equipped to only a Shaddoll monster, and it becomes that attribute. During your main phase, you can fusion summon one Shaddoll Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material monster, including the equipped monster. We're just going to look at the big disruption card that we have. Probably the biggest one, Super Polymerization. Discard a card, then fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from either field. This is the strongest form of removal that we have. Simply put, we can set this along with one of our set Shaddoll cards. The second we see something big that we can't deal with otherwise, we simply flip up a Super Poly. Fuse it away using one of our Shaddolls and whatever attribute their monster happens to be to bring out an attribute-appropriate fusion card. The big thing about this is the last line of its text. Neither player can activate cards or effects in response to this card's activation. It cannot be negated, meaning we can always succeed in dealing with something. This card is way too strong to not have in the deck. Instant Fusion, limited to 1. Special summon one level 5 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, which we only have one of, I believe, which is El Shaddoll Winda. But we can use Winda as other material, because unfortunately it dies at the end of the turn, and it allows us to get something from our graveyard. Allure of Darkness is very basic. You draw 2 cards, if you could focus. You draw 2 cards, then banish one dark monster from your hand, and if you don't have any, your entire hand goes bye-bye. Foolish Burial. Simple card text. Send one monster from the deck to the graveyard. Again, activating any of our numerous Shaddoll cards that we need. Also limited to 1, but we'll definitely be running that one. This, on the other hand, target 5 monsters in your graveyard, shuffle all 5 into the deck, and draw 2 cards. Definitely running at least 1. Speaking of sideboarding options again, this structure deck has Twin Twisters. Discard a card and then target up to 2 spell traps on the field and destroy them. Marvelous sideboard card. Absolutely, I don't know where I put it, but it's going over there now. Shaddoll Core. Sinister Shadow Games. Pura Shaddoll Ale. Another sideboard card. Lost Wind. Another fusion card. El Shaddoll Wendigo. Must first be fusion summoned. Of course, as all cards. You can target one monster you control this turn. It cannot be destroyed by battle with an opponent's special summon monster. You can also use this effect of El Shaddoll once per turn. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you target one Shaddoll, so spell a trap in your graveyard and add to your hand. El Shaddoll Anutalis. And a water monster. Must first be fusion summoned. Neither player can special summon monsters from the hand or graveyard using spell or trap effects. This can be very handy, because there are a lot of things floating around the meta right now that you can toss straight from the hand to summon to the field. This just turns that off entirely. Shaddoll Construct. During your main phase, you can fusion summon one Shaddoll fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. If this card is in the graveyard, you can send one Shaddoll card from your hand or face up field to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon this card. So it essentially acts as another fusion enabler, but it isn't very good. It requires 2 flip monsters specifically, and then just to get a fusion out, there are much, much better ways we can get of doing that, except for Shaddoll Construct. Then we have, of course, the structure deck cards here, which nobody really needs. Away they go. So, with that in mind, I'm going to sit myself down, open the remaining 2, if I can find them back here in my collection of stuff. The remaining 2 structure decks. I'm going to open them, I'm going to combine whatever we have to an effective deck, and I'm going to return to you once I have. Also, I should point out that our initial budget did give us a deck box, as well as 2 sets of sleeves. Marvelous, isn't it? So, after much deliberation and thought with my limited resources, this is the deck we're going to be using. I'll be going through the monsters and extra deck first, spells and traps second. So, something I noticed when just going through this is the fact that this structure deck gives you an incredibly solid Shaddoll core. You can adapt it nearly any way you would want, and you'll get at least a contender in terms of competitiveness. It is great. But to simply walk you through the decisions, we are running 3 Shaddoll Wendy's. They are simply one of the core cards of the deck. There is no reason you should not be running 3. They are marvelous. 3 Shaddoll Hedgehogs, because I like to be able to pull other cards to my hand, or when they are flipped face up, draw something like our Shaddoll Fusions. Shaddoll Squamata, again, similar reason. When it's dumped, we can dump yet another one for additional cards in our graveyard, or we can flip to destroy. It's really useful. 2 Shaddoll Beasts, I feel like since they're level 5, they're a bit harder to get out on the field unless you have a Wendy to call one out, but having them to dump to draw a card is invaluable. 2 Falco, these are actually the only tuner in the deck in case we draw any synchro monsters we wish to use, but being able to summon another card onto the field by itself is quite handy. Dragon, we're running a 2-off again because honestly I had extra spots in the deck that I didn't know what to fill with, and Dragon seemed like a good call. I was going to run 1, but for the time being we'll be running 2. It can destroy a spell or trap, it can return something to the hand. It can be useful. We're running 2 Mathematicians as well as 2 Performance Trick Clowns as sort of a support to the Shaddoll package. A single Electromagnetic Turtle, again its effect can only be used once per duel, so I felt like 1 was enough. A single El Shaddoll Aerial, because it is a fairly weak card in and of itself, but it can be very handy when we dump it. And a single Shaddoll Hound. In addition to this, of course, we have the singular Blackluster Soldier, just for an additional wave removal and or a finisher, should we feel that we need one. Extra deck-wise, as you can see, there is lots of purple, probably how this deck is going to stay for the time being. We are running 3 of the fucker I cannot pronounce, Apkalone. 3 Acapella, 3 Constructs, 3 Shekinagas, all core cards of our deck, and whenever we can summon them, we will. 2 Winda to shut down our opponent, and then 1 Grista, 1 Onyatolis, and 1 Wendigo, sort of to... It's essentially for super poly, so regardless of what element the opponent happens to have on the field, we have something we can fuse into to remove their field. Right, let's carry on to the spells. Shocking absolutely nobody, considering we're playing a fusion archetype. A majority of our spells are going to be fusion related. We are running 3 of our core Shaddoll Fusion, 3 El Shaddoll Fusions, 3 Super Polymerizations, and the singular allowed Instant Fusion. In support to this, we are also running 3 Allure of Darkness, because if there's something we are currently lacking, it is a way of drawing into our power cards. We only really have Shaddoll Beast that helps us with straight card draw and finding spells, and Allure can help drastically in doing so. We also have a singular Pot of Avarice in case we need to recycle some of our graveyard cards, and the single Foolish Burial. In addition, we're also running 2 Shaddoll Incarnation, just to be able to manipulate the board a little bit and special summon any of our dead king cards. Surprisingly enough, we actually have a side deck as well, so I'm going to go over that quick because it is only 9 cards currently. This is still here because screw my life. 3 Twin Twisters, just because this card is really good for back row removal in case a matchup needs it. 3 Lost Wind, in case we need to shut down a particular monster. and 3 Lava Golem if we end up against Dragon Lynx or something else that will absolutely destroy us. And that, my friends, is the starting deck list. Now, every time we come back here, we're going to be opening some packs together and hopefully improving what we already have. But I will say with all honesty, what we already have is really good. I'm surprised that this is actually a structure deck that is as cheap as it is. Even though sort of Shaddoll has lost some relevance in recent days, I am really, really happy to say I will be happy piloting this deck for a long time to come. Now, over to myself in the preparation stage.
So, with our initial opening out of the way, it's about time I let you in on how this journey is going to work. As some of you may have noticed during the intro, our goal for this series is rather vague. With Konami having shut down most tournaments due to the ongoing pandemic, as well as myself being rather unable to visit any local tournaments on a regular basis, it becomes incredibly difficult to set a goal like topping a regional. For this reason, I've decided to take a much different approach to this sealed-only challenge. Some of you may have noticed a mention of star chips during the intro. For those that remember, they were used back in the olden days of screwing the rules. They will be our currency during the series. We will collect them by defeating opponents in our duels, similarly to how it was once done in the show. For every match we manage to win, we'll gain ourselves a star chip. If we manage to win in a 2-0 sweep, we'll gain ourselves a bonus star chip, rounding up at 3 total. Similarly, however, if we lose a match, we will be conceding some of our valuable star chips to our opponent, even though they have no use for them. The chips will be useful throughout the series for a variety of reasons, such as increasing our weekly budget, extra booster packs for our openings, or perhaps the chance to actually screw the rules themselves. This is also where you, the dear viewer, could pitch in ideas for what our star chips could be spent on. If I happen to spot an idea that I like down in the comments below, I'll be sure to implement it for future episodes. With that explanation out of the way, this week will only feature a single duel, as the video is already rather long thanks to our previous opening. From the next week and onward, we will be doing a total of 5 duels every video, hopefully with an improved deck. Speaking of improving our deck though, how are we going to go about that? Well, there's a few ways that we can take the Shaddoll archetype to improve it significantly. And, let's just say I have something in mind. Now, on the other hand, I'm going to cut to myself to feature our first ever duel. So welcome to our first ever duel. You guys have no idea how excited I was to get back in the swing of things. Our opening hand is not too great considering we have no access to a fusion spell, but with the Allure that we decided to play right away, we managed to draw into one as well as our Turtle. I decided to banish Hound off of the Allure effect since it has no current use to us, then I set Wendy, our Incarnation, and I activate the Shaddoll fusion we just drew into. I throw Beast and Turtle from my hand to get Construct onto the board, activating the effect of Beast to draw an additional card, and Construct to dump Squamata from deck to grave. It activates its effect to throw Thaka from deck to grave, summoning itself face down. On that board, I decide to end my turn, letting us know that we're playing against Dark Magicians. Our opponent starts off with an Allure of his own, instantly chaining his Soul Servant. This allows him to put any card that mentions Dark Magician on the top of his deck, with Allure ensuring he draws whatever he put there. He banishes a Dark Magician from his Allure, to where he activates yet another Allure. He then goes into the Spellbook combo, which lets him thin out his deck by 3 cards and then drawing 2 cards at the end of it. He then activates Magician's Souls in his hand, summoning it to the field by sending a card from his deck to the graveyard. He then activates Magician's effect, discarding 2 Spell or Trap cards to draw 2 new cards. He then follows the play by playing Dark Magical Circle, letting him look at the top 3 cards of his deck and take any card that mentions a Dark Magician. Its second effect will allow him to banish any card on the field if Dark Magician is summoned. When he pops this card, I decide to activate our Incarnation to bring back our Beast face down, hopefully drawing his attention to it. He then activates a Dark Magical Inheritance, letting him draw a spell from his deck. Another Soul Servant comes down, activating its effect to draw into Mahad, which special summons itself thanks to its effect. He then links them off into Anaconda, meaning our worst enemy is upon us. Since we have no negates active, we get face-to-face with the man himself, Dragoon. Dragoon immediately pops our Construct, which we attempt to activate to bring back a Shaddoll fusion from our grave to our hand, which he decides to negate. He then decides to smack into Wendy, allowing us to get a Squamata from deck, and then ending his turn by activating his 3rd Soul Servant, putting a Magician's Rod on top of his deck. Right now we are in deep shit. Our only current out Dragoon is Super Poly, but without Anaconda trying to fetch it, we have to dig really deep into our deck to hope that we get one. On our turn, we draw into an Incarnation, which is not good enough to get out of our current situation. To test the waters, I attempt to activate Squamata's effect to destroy his Anaconda, which he negates. Hopefully, he forgot the fact that I have a beast face down, which we are going to use immediately to attempt to draw 2 new cards. We draw into nothing of real use, unfortunately, but we decide to send our Trick Clown to the graveyard, special summoning it in defense mode by paying 1,000 life points. Then we activate Pot of Avarice, throwing 5 of our monster cards back into our deck in an attempt to draw 2 new cards. In doing so, voila, Super Poly. We immediately throw down Super Poly, take his Dragoon with our beast in order to summon a Winda. We then flip up Falco to bring back a beast face down in order to draw more cards later on. We move into battle phase and beat over his Anaconda, giving it what it deserves, and then punching him in the face for 600 damage, which isn't too much to be fair, ending our turn by setting our Incarnation. Moving into the next turn, our opponent plays a Magician's Rod, activating its effect to put a card into his hand, which turns out to be Dark Magical Circle. He looks at it but finds no target, and then activates his Soul Servant, to which he draws 2 new cards, summons one of his magicians that allows him to draw a Dark Magician to his hand. He then beats over our Falco, to which I activate Incarnation to prevent any further battle damage by flipping it face down again. No effect, sadly. He then beats over our Performage Trick Clown, which I decide not to activate its effect, again taking unnecessary damage. Our turn comes around and we draw into a Wendy, which is not the greatest, so we flip open Beast, hoping to draw into 2 new cards. To which he activates Successor's Soul, immediately tributing one of his spellcasters to summon a Dark Magician from his hand and destroy one of our monsters. He destroys Winda, we grab a Shaddoll Fusion from our graveyard, and he decides to banish our Beast. Beast effect still goes off, and we manage to drop a Winda to get a new Beast onto the board, to which we flip open Incarnation to attempt to bring back our Winda. It gets negated by his Magician's Navigation in Grave, which, thankfully for us, means we can play our Shaddoll Fusion. We fuse off our Beast and our Mathematician to get into Shekinaga. This play is a little bit funny. He attempts to activate his Magician's effect to power up Dark Magician's attack points, but forgets that we have Shekinaga on the board, so we immediately negate that activation by having a Shaddoll in our hand, and his board is now wiped. On his turn, he activates his last Soul Servant, allowing him to draw into 2 new cards, one of which being a Magician's Rod. He then activates his 3rd Magical Circle, finding nothing. He then activates the effect of Magician Souls, special summoning it to the field and attempting to activate its effect by discarding 2 of his cards. I immediately negate this by throwing Squamata from my hand to the grave. No drawing cards for you, sir. I discard a Hedgehog in order to draw a new Shaddoll to my hand. He then sets 1 card, and it brings us to the final turn of this game. I will activate Foolish Burial that we just drew into, in order to send Ariel to the graveyard. I then banish a Dark Magician, a Dark Magician Girl, and Dragoon from his graveyard to make sure that they do not come back. I decide to set the Wendy and beat over his Rod, putting him in a sticky situation with no card draws remaining. He draws his final card of the game, which turns out to be his 3rd Magician's Rod that cannot activate. He brings the turn over to us. I flip over Wendy in an attempt to summon another one, and he scoops. That is the end of our first ever duel. Unfortunately, this is not a match duel, so it will not count towards our statistics and it will not give us any start chips, but this is a good enough way to see that the deck can actually do some damage. Starting next week, we're going to be playing some match duels and hopefully giving ourselves some start chips. But until then, I wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you for watching this crap so far. I am completely new when it comes to making videos in this style, and I would love to hear feedback. Other than that, please subscribe, please like the video, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers, lads.